The Texas sun was a relentless orb of fury, beating down on the cracked earth. Silas Crawford rode with a purpose that felt more like a grudging duty than an eager return. For 10 years, he had traded the dusty plains for the polished floors of Boston banks, his hands accustomed to fountain pens, not reins. Now, the telegram tucked inside his waistcoat felt like a curse. His father, Arthur Crawford, was dead, and the sprawling Crawford ranch was his. He crested the last hill, and the sight that met his eyes was not the proud homestead of his childhood. The fences were sagging, the corrals were empty save for a few listless horses, and the main house stood with a defeated stoop, its paint peeling like sunburned skin. This wasn't a ranch, it was a ghost. A bitter knot formed in his gut. His father, a man who had built an empire from nothing, had left him. This? He dismounted in the yard, the gravel crunching under his expensive city boots. The air was thick with the scent of neglect and decay. He found the foreman, a weathered old man named Jed, sitting on the porch steps, whittling a stick. Jed looked up, his eyes as tired as the land itself. "You're late, boy," Jed said, his voice a low rasp. Silas stiffened. "I'm not a boy anymore, Jed. Where's the will?" Jed pointed with his chin toward the house. "Inside. The lawyer's waiting." The lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Finch, sat in the dusty parlor, a sheaf of papers on his lap. He went straight to the point, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Your father's will is complex, Mr. Crawford. He left you the land and everything on it, but the ranch is in a considerable amount of debt, more than the assets are worth, in fact." Silas's world tilted. "Debt? That's impossible. My father was a legend." "Legends fade," Finch said dryly. "The drought, the cattle rustling, it hit everyone hard. Arthur was too proud to ask for help, and he made a final stipulation. A part of the land, a small parcel, was left to someone else. A woman." "A woman?" Silas scoffed. "What woman?" "Elara Vance," Finch stated, his gaze level. "Her husband, James, was your father's right-hand man. He died 6 months ago in a riding accident. Your father felt it was his duty to provide for her." Silas's face flushed with anger. "He gave away my land to a widow. This is a joke." "It's a legally binding will, Mr. Crawford," Finch said, unfazed. "And there's more. The main bank loan is due in 6 months. If it's not paid, they'll foreclose on the entire property." The news hit Silas like a physical blow. He had come here expecting a grand inheritance, a legacy to lord over, and instead he had inherited a disaster. A wave of fury washed over him, aimed at his father, at the land, at everything. He stood up abruptly. "I need to see this woman, now." Jed led him to a small, humble cabin at the edge of the property, a place that felt a world away from the main house. Elara Vance was sitting on her porch, mending a saddle. She was younger than Silas expected, maybe in her late 20s, with a quiet strength in her posture. Her dark hair was braided neatly, and her hands, though small, were calloused and capable. Silas didn't mince words. "Mrs. Vance, I'm Silas Crawford. I understand my father left you a piece of my land." She looked up, her gaze steady, without a hint of fear or deference. "It's a small parcel, Mr. Crawford, a place for me and my son, Ben. Your father was a good man." "A good man who left me a bankrupt ranch," Silas retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I need to sell this place to pay the debts. I need you to sign a release for that land." Elara's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened slightly. "I'm not signing anything. This is where my husband is buried. This is where my son belongs." "You don't understand," Silas said, stepping closer. "This is business. I have no attachment to this place. It's a financial ruin, and I'm here to salvage what I can." "And what you can salvage is a widow's home," she shot back, her voice low but firm. "I understand perfectly. You see this land as a problem. I see it as home. It's not for sale." Silas stared at her, a knot of frustration tightening in his chest. He was used to people caving to his demands, to the power of the Crawford name. But this woman, this poor widow, was unyielding. He had come expecting a grateful handshake and an easy signature. Instead, he found an immovable obstacle. He turned on his heel, his frustration boiling over. He needed to find a way to make her see reason. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. He was Silas Crawford, and he was here to take charge. But for the first time in a long time, he felt utterly powerless. He walked back to the main house, the sun setting and casting long, mournful shadows across the dilapidated land. He had inherited dust, debt, and a formidable woman who stood in his way. The Crawford ranch was his, but it felt less like a prize and more like a cage, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the next 6 months would be a battle, not just for the land, but for his very soul. The next morning, Silas was determined to take control. He had spent a restless night in his father's old, musty bedroom, the scent of pipe tobacco and old leather filling the air. His plan was simple: confront the reality of the ranch head-on and find a solution that didn't involve the stubborn widow. He dressed in his finest city clothes, a tailored suit and polished leather shoes. The heat was already oppressive, and he felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. He found Jed in the barn, the old foreman mending a saddle. "Jed, I need a full account of the livestock and a breakdown of the expenses. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with," Silas ordered, his voice echoing in the cavernous, half-empty barn. Jed didn't even look up. "We're dealing with a whole lot of nothing, son. The last herd we had was sold to pay off some of the smaller debts. Most of the horses are old and a few are sick. We've got a couple dozen cattle, but they're scrawny from the drought. Expenses. Feed costs, medicine, and what little pay I can get for the hands who haven't left yet." The grim reality hit Silas again. He was standing in the hollowed-out shell of his father's life's work. The silence was punctuated only by the distant, weary lowing of a cow. "What about the other ranchers?" Silas asked, a desperate hope clinging to his words. "Can't we get a loan from them? A temporary one?" Jed finally looked up, his expression a mix of pity and scorn. "The other ranchers? They're all struggling, Silas. They're circling this place like buzzards, waiting for it to fail. They'd rather buy it up for a bargain than help us out. You've been gone too long. You don't understand how things are out here now." Silas felt his polished exterior crack. He was a man of numbers, of ledgers and projections, but out here, none of that mattered. He was a stranger in his own land. He walked out of the barn and toward the corrals, kicking at a pile of loose dirt. He saw a small figure emerge from Ilara's cabin, a young boy, no older than 5 or 6, with his mother's dark hair and serious eyes. He carried a small bucket and walked toward the well with a determination that seemed too old for his age. Ilara was right behind him, carrying a heavier pail. They worked in a silent, practiced rhythm, drawing water, the boy helping as best he could. Silas watched them from a distance, the scene a stark contrast to his own helplessness. They were struggling, but they were doing. They were surviving. A frustrated thought entered his mind. What if he just paid her to leave? He could offer a sum of money, a decent one, and she could go somewhere else. It was the logical, business-minded solution. He walked toward her cabin, his stride long and purposeful. "Mrs. Vance," he began, trying to sound as reasonable as possible. "I've been thinking. I'm willing to make you an offer. I'll buy your parcel of land from you. A generous offer, enough to set you up somewhere else, maybe in a town with a school for your son." Ilara stopped her work, her eyes meeting his. "This isn't about money, Mr. Crawford." "Everything's about money," he countered, gesturing around at the dusty ranch. "This entire place is on the brink of collapse because of it. Your husband is dead. What's left for you here?" The low hum of a horse-drawn carriage broke the tension. A fancy enclosed carriage, pulled by 2 sleek black horses, came to a halt in the yard. The door opened, and a man, dressed in a sharp suit, stepped out. He was a local land speculator, known for his aggressive business practices, a man Silas's father had despised. "Mr. Crawford," the man, Franklin Stone, said with a toothy smile. "I heard about your troubles. My deepest condolences. I've been a long-time admirer of your father's land. I'd be willing to take it off your hands, of course, for a very fair price." Silas knew what fair meant coming from a man like Stone. It meant a pittance. He was a vulture. "The ranch isn't for sale," Silas said, his voice cold. Stone's smile didn't waver. "It's a shame to see such a fine piece of land go to waste. But I'll be patient. I know you'll come around. And if not, the bank will sell it at auction. I'll be there, of course." He cast a quick predatory glance at Ilara before getting back into his carriage and disappearing in a cloud of dust. Silas turned back to Ilara. "See? This is what I'm dealing with. I see a man who thinks the world owes him something just because of his name," she said, her voice quiet but pointed. "This isn't just land, Mr. Crawford. It's a way of life. It's respect, and you can't buy either of those things." Her words were a slap in the face. She was right in a way. His expensive clothes and city ways were a costume. He was a cowboy in silk, a stranger to his own legacy. He had no skills, no plan, just a name and a mounting desperation. Ilara picked up her pails and walked toward her cabin, her son trotting beside her. Silas was left alone in the middle of the dusty yard, the sun burning on his back, the echoes of Stone's words, and Ilara's rebuke ringing in his ears. He was at a crossroads. He could let the vultures circle and wait for his inheritance to fall, or he could swallow his pride and learn from the one person who seemed to understand what he had truly lost. The second option felt like a defeat, but the alternative was annihilation. The shame of the previous day had a bitter taste. Silas woke before the sun, the quiet of the ranch a stark contrast to the cacophony of the city. He put on a pair of old worn jeans he found in the closet, a relic of his youth, and a simple cotton shirt. The clothes were too tight, but they felt more honest than his tailored suit. He found Jed in the barn, already working. "What do we need to do first?" Silas asked, his voice low. Jed looked at him, surprised. The question was a genuine one, not a command. "First, we need to fix that fence along the north pasture. The cattle will wander off if we don't." Silas had never held a hammer in his life for anything other than hanging a picture. He walked to the fence line with Jed, the old foreman, pointing out the broken posts and frayed wire. The work was immediate and punishing. The hammer felt heavy in his hands, and his soft palms quickly developed blisters. The sun climbed higher, and sweat plastered his shirt to his back. Around noon, a small figure appeared in the distance. It was Ilara's son, Ben, carrying 2 canteens of water and some dried meat wrapped in a cloth. He walked with a serious gait, his eyes fixed on Silas. He handed 1 canteen to Jed, then extended the other to Silas. "Mama said you'd need this," Ben said, his voice a quiet whisper. Silas took the canteen, surprised. He was parched, his throat a desert. He drank greedily, the cool water a small miracle. "Thank you," he said. "Welcome," the boy replied, and then he was gone, walking back to his cabin as silently as he had come. Silas looked at Jed. "She's helping." Jed took a long drink from his canteen. "She knows what it takes to survive out here. We're all in this together. Whether you like it or not, the ranch may be yours, but it's our home." The words resonated with a simple truth that Silas had never considered. In Boston, a business was an entity, a set of assets and liabilities. Here it was a living, breathing thing, intertwined with the lives of the people who worked it. Later that afternoon, a horse-drawn buggy pulled up to Ilara's cabin. A well-dressed man, a local cattle buyer Silas recognized from his youth, stepped out. Silas's blood ran cold. He walked quickly toward the cabin, a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. "Mrs. Vance," the man was saying, "I heard you have a few head of cattle you're looking to sell. I'm willing to offer a good price." Ilara's voice was firm. "They're not for sale, Mr. Davies. They belong to the Crawford Ranch now. But I was told the Crawford Ranch is going under," Davies said, his smile a thin line. "It's a good opportunity for you. You can cut your ties with this place and get a fresh start. My husband's dying wish was for me to stay here and watch over his son, Ilara said, her gaze unwavering. He believed in Arthur Crawford, and I believe in his legacy. I will not sell. Silas stood behind Davies, a silent witness. The buyer's face fell, and he gave a curt nod before climbing back into his buggy and leaving. Ilara turned and saw Silas. Her expression was unreadable. I overheard, he said, the words feeling clumsy on his tongue. You didn't have to do that. I did, she said simply. Those cattle are the last of our reserve. We need them to rebuild the herd. If we sell them now, there's nothing left. Your father trusted my husband to take care of things. I'm just continuing that trust. Silas felt a profound sense of humility. He had spent his time scheming, thinking of ways to get rid of her, and she had been quietly working to protect the very thing he had come to dismiss. She was defending his inheritance, not from him, but for him. What do we do now? He asked, the "we" feeling strange on his lips. Ilara's face softened slightly. We start small. We fix the fences. We mend the gear. We find feed for the animals that are left. And we start planting what we can to prepare for the spring. The work was endless. They spent the rest of the day together, not as business partners, but as two people bound by a shared, silent burden. She taught him how to properly use a hammer, how to handle the wire without cutting his hands, and how to spot a weak fence post. She didn't lecture. She simply demonstrated, her movements efficient and practiced. As the sun set, they were still working, two figures against a painted sky. The blisters on Silas's hands ached, but it was a good kind of ache. It was the ache of honest labor. He was learning, and the most valuable lesson wasn't about cattle or fences. It was about the dignity of work, the quiet strength of resilience, and the power of a woman who chose to save a legacy rather than abandon it for a quick profit. The next few weeks fell into a grueling rhythmic pattern. Silas woke at dawn, his body now accustomed to the early hour, and joined Jed and the few remaining ranch hands. He learned to muck stalls, mend tack, and saddle a horse. His hands, once soft and pale, were now calloused and stained with dirt and grease. The tailored suits were relegated to the back of the closet, replaced by worn denim and a wide-brimmed hat that protected him from the brutal sun. He saw Ilara and her son every day. They were a constant presence, a quiet force of industry. Ilara worked on her small vegetable garden, a patch of green hope in the parched landscape. She mended clothes, cooked meals for Jed and the hands, and often appeared with a fresh canteen of water or a plate of warm biscuits when they were working farthest from the house. There was no fanfare, no expectation of thanks. It was simply what she did. It was how she contributed. Silas, in turn, found himself gravitating towards their small cabin in the evenings. He started with small talk, then the conversation turned to the ranch. Ilara had a deep, intuitive knowledge of the land. She spoke of the soil, the changing seasons, and the moods of the animals with a reverence that Silas had never heard before. He learned more from her in those quiet conversations than he had in a decade of studying ledgers. One sweltering afternoon, a rider approached the ranch. It was Franklin Stone, the land speculator, with another man in tow, a banker from the very institution holding the deed to the Crawford ranch. "Mr. Crawford," Stone said with a condescending smile, "just a friendly visit. I was curious to see how you're getting along. I brought Mr. Harrison from the bank. He's here to assess the progress." Silas felt a surge of cold fury. This was a staged inspection, a move to intimidate and humiliate him into giving up. He gestured to the newly repaired fence line. "We're making progress. The ranch is being restored." Harrison, the banker, walked with a meticulous, judging step. He looked at the half-empty corrals and the dust-choked fields. "Mr. Crawford, this is a beautiful piece of land, but it's a hollow shell. I see little to no progress that would justify extending the loan. Our deadline is firm." "And I see a man who has no idea what he's talking about," Silas retorted, his voice low and dangerous. "This ranch is more than cattle and fences. It's heart and grit, and we have plenty of both." Stone laughed, a cruel, short sound. "Heart and grit won't pay the loan, Crawford. Why don't you do what's smart? Take a modest profit, pay off the debt, and get back to your life in the city. Leave the mess to someone who knows how to handle it." Just then, Ilara emerged from her cabin, her son holding her hand. She had a basket of fresh eggs in her arm, a symbol of their small, hard-won victories. She walked past the men, her head held high. "Good afternoon, Mr. Stone," she said politely, but with an edge of steel in her voice. "I hope you and Mr. Harrison had a pleasant journey. You're wasting your time here. The Crawford Ranch is not for sale." Stone's smile faltered. "Mrs. Vance, what do you know about this? This is a business matter between men." "It's a business matter between a family and a legacy," she corrected him. "And I'm a part of this family. I'm a part of this land. My husband died working to save this ranch, and I won't let his efforts be for nothing. The Crawford Ranch will stand." Her words were a shield, a silent, powerful defense. Silas watched, stunned and grateful. She had faced down two powerful men with nothing but her conviction and the strength of her will. Stone and Harrison, sensing the futility of their visit, left with a final, lingering look of frustration. Later that evening, after the dust from the buggy had settled, Silas walked to Ilara's cabin. He found her mending a small tear in her son's shirt. "Why?" he asked, the single word carrying the weight of all his gratitude and confusion. She looked up, her hands still. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because your father did right by my family, and I owe it to him to do right by his." "I came here to take," he said, the admission a painful one. "And you came here to give." "We're all here to give, Mr. Crawford," she said softly. "The land gives us life, and in return we give it our labor, our respect, and our heart. That's the only way things grow out here." She was teaching him a new language, one of earth and empathy, of community and quiet heroism. He had come to a place of financial ruin, expecting to find a quick escape, and instead he was finding a purpose he never knew he was missing. The vultures might be circling, but with every passing day, he and Ilara were building a stronger, more resilient foundation. The seasons were changing, and with them, the ranch began to breathe again. The dry, dusty air of summer was replaced by the crisp, cool winds of autumn. The small vegetable garden at Ilara's cabin flourished, and the few remaining cattle, now fed on new grass, looked healthier. They were a long way from a full herd, but they were a start. Silas had changed too. The physical labor had hardened his body and softened his arrogant edges. He no longer saw himself as a city boy playing a part. He was a rancher now, a title he had earned with calloused hands and a bruised pride. He was still a man of logic and numbers, but he was learning that some things couldn't be calculated on a ledger, like the quiet companionship of Jed, the unwavering loyalty of the ranch hands, and the steadfast support of Ilara. They were working on the main corral, fixing a broken gate, when a rider came galloping into the yard, a cloud of dust in his wake. It was a young, nervous ranch hand named Billy. "Mr. Crawford! Mr. Crawford!" Billy yelled, his voice laced with panic. "The creek's rising! A flash flood upriver!" A flash flood. Silas's mind went to the pastures in the lower valley, where the small herd was grazing. They had to be moved, and quickly. "Jed, get the hands! Round up the horses. We need to move them to higher ground. Billy, ride to Ilara's cabin, tell her to get Ben, and get to the main house. Now!" Silas shouted, his voice a commanding roar that surprised even himself. He and Jed rode out, the sky darkening with ominous grey clouds. The wind was picking up, and the air was charged with a tension that was both exciting and terrifying. The creek, normally a placid ribbon of water, was a churning, muddy torrent. They found the herd, and the animals were already spooked, milling nervously near the rising water. The work was a chaotic, heart-pounding blur. They rode hard, yelling and cracking whips, trying to turn the frightened cattle and push them up the steep incline to the higher pastures. The rain started, a sudden heavy downpour that turned the ground into a slick, treacherous mess. One of the old horses, spooked by a flash of lightning, stumbled, sending Jed flying. Silas rode back, his heart in his throat. Jed was dazed but unhurt. "Go, Silas, get the herd. I'll be fine," Jed yelled over the roar of the wind and rain. Silas hesitated for a split second, then turned back to the herd. He couldn't risk the entire ranch for one man's injury. He trusted Jed to be okay. He rode like a demon, pushing the cattle, his hands raw from the reins, his face stinging with the rain. He was no longer thinking about the inheritance or the debt. He was thinking only of the living, breathing things that were depending on him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the herd was safely on higher ground. Silas was soaked to the bone, mud caked on his clothes and face, but a fierce sense of satisfaction coursed through him. He had done it. He had faced down a force of nature and won. He rode back to the main house, his exhausted horse stumbling. He found Ilara on the porch, a worried look on her face. Ben was wrapped in a blanket, safe inside. She saw his mud-caked clothes and the weariness in his eyes. "You're all right," she said, her voice filled with a quiet relief. "We lost a few fences, but the herd's safe," he said, his voice raw. "Jed took a spill, but he's okay. What about you?" "We're fine," she said. "Billy got to us in time. You knew what to do. You were a leader." Her words were a balm to his tired soul. He had relied on his instincts, on the knowledge he had been quietly absorbing, and it had worked. The ranch was still in trouble, but for the first time he felt like he had a fighting chance. But the day's drama was not yet over. Just as the rain began to subside, a rider approached. It was a local rancher, one of the men who had been circling like a vulture. His face was pale and grim. "Silas," he said, dismounting, "you saved your herd. We lost most of ours." The flash flood came too fast. The man's pride was broken, his face a mask of grief. Silas looked at him, and for the first time, he didn't see a rival. He saw a man who had lost everything. He thought of his own herd, safe on the hill, and the bitter rivalry between the ranches felt pointless. They were all just people trying to survive in a harsh, unforgiving land. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tom," Silas said, his voice genuinely empathetic. "If there's anything we can do—" "There's nothing," Tom said, his shoulders slumping. "It's all gone. I'm wiped out." Silas felt a profound sadness. He had won a small victory, but it had come at a great cost to others. He looked at Ilara, her face a mix of relief and sorrow. She understood the unspoken code of the West. You celebrated your own survival, but you mourned with your neighbor's loss. The storm had passed, but it had left a new kind of reckoning in its wake. The land was not a battleground to be conquered. It was a force to be respected, a harsh teacher that demanded humility and cooperation. And Silas, standing in the mud, finally understood the difference. The weeks following the flood were a blur of hard work and quiet camaraderie. The other ranches, hit hard by the storm, were in disarray, but the Crawford Ranch, with its herd intact, was in a unique, if precarious, position. Other ranchers, men who had once looked down on Silas, now approached him hat in hand, seeking help. Silas, to his own surprise, found himself extending a hand. He traded work for work, offering his men to help repair fences and tend to sick cattle in exchange for a few head of their healthier stock. He was rebuilding his herd, not by buying or selling, but through the oldest currency in the West, mutual aid. He was learning the meaning of community, a concept alien to his city-bred mind. His partnership with Ilara deepened. She wasn't just a helper, she was a partner in every sense of the word. She had an encyclopedic knowledge of local plants, knowing which ones were good for feed and which were poisonous. She could read the weather in the clouds and predict a storm with uncanny accuracy. She taught Silas how to care for sick animals, how to set a broken bone, and how to find peace in the quiet moments between the chaos. They spent one afternoon mending a broken gate. The work was slow and meticulous, but they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. "How did you know so much about all of this?" Silas asked, gesturing around at the ranch. "My husband taught me," she said simply. "James was a good man. He loved this land. He taught me everything he knew. He believed a man was only as good as his word, and a ranch was only as good as its soil." Silas felt a pang of jealousy, a strange emotion he hadn't expected. He was jealous of a man he had never met, a man whose ghost lingered in every corner of the ranch. "My father," Silas began, then trailed off. "He never taught me any of this. He sent me to school in the East. He wanted me to be a banker, a gentleman. He wanted me to be anything but a rancher." Ilara stopped working and looked at him. "He didn't send you away because he didn't love you, Silas. He sent you away because he wanted you to have options he never had. He wanted you to have a life that wasn't a constant struggle." "He never trusted me to run this place," Silas said, the words heavy with a decade of resentment. "Maybe he trusted you to find your own way," she said softly. "And maybe you did. You came back. You're here. You're doing the work." Her words felt like a revelation. He had always seen his father's actions as a rejection, but maybe they were an act of love. He had come back not because he was forced to, but because, in a way, he had been called. That evening, a rider from another ranch, a man named George, approached Silas. "Silas, the bank is foreclosing on my land. I'm selling what's left. I want to offer you my herd. They're good cattle. I'd rather see them go to someone who respects the land and the people on it than to a vulture like Stone." Silas was floored. This was more than just a business deal. It was a transfer of trust, a recognition of his new identity. He accepted the offer, and the next day a small but healthy herd of cattle was delivered to the Crawford Ranch. The addition of the new cattle was a turning point. The ranch began to feel alive again, its future no longer a distant hope, but a tangible reality. They were still deeply in debt, but now they had a fighting chance. But their newfound success did not go unnoticed. Franklin Stone was a man who hated to be thwarted. He saw the flourishing of the Crawford Ranch as a personal affront. He came to the ranch a few days later, his face tight with anger. "You're a fool, Crawford," he sneered. "You're taking on other people's problems. You're building a house on a sinking foundation. You can't outrun the bank." "Maybe I'm not running," Silas said, his voice calm. "Maybe I'm standing my ground." Stone's eyes narrowed, his gaze falling on Ilara, who stood a few feet away, her hands on her hips. "You think you're so smart, little lady? You think you can stand in my way? The bank is in my pocket. I can ruin you all with a single phone call." Ilara didn't flinch. "You can try, Mr. Stone, but we're not alone out here anymore. The people who lost everything, they're not against us. They're with us, and a community that stands together is stronger than any man with money." Stone looked from Ilara to Silas, then back to the newly arrived cattle, a testament to their growing strength. He knew she was right. He had underestimated the power of the human spirit, the bonds of a community. He turned and left, his defeat a palpable weight in the air. Silas looked at Ilara, a profound sense of admiration and gratitude swelling in his chest. She had not only helped him save the ranch, she had helped him find his place in the world. He was no longer just the heir to a fortune. He was a part of something larger, something more meaningful. The 6-month deadline was fast approaching, hanging over them like a dark cloud. Silas and Ilara worked tirelessly, preparing the ranch for the final reckoning. They sold a small portion of the new herd, earning a modest profit that helped them pay for supplies and food. It wasn't enough to pay off the bank, not even close, but it was a sign of their commitment. Their efforts to rebuild had garnered them the respect of the entire community. Men who had once scoffed at the city boy now offered him a respectful nod. The local blacksmith, the general store owner, even the saloon keeper, they all seemed to be rooting for them. One day, Silas and Ilara were in the barn mending a bridle when Jed came in, a grim look on his face. "Silas," he said, his voice low, "I just got word from a friend at the bank. Finch, the lawyer, he's in cahoots with Stone. They're going to use the foreclosure to force an auction. They've been planning it all along." Silas felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. A public auction. It was the last resort, the final humiliation. Stone would be there, waiting, ready to buy the land for a fraction of its worth. "How?" Silas asked, his voice tight. "They're leveraging every last bit of debt," Jed explained. "They're calling in all the markers, making it so you can't possibly pay it off in time. The auction is set for 2 weeks from now." The news was a gut punch. They had worked so hard, fought so fiercely, only to be outmaneuvered by a man who saw the world as a game to be won, with no regard for the human cost. That evening, Silas sat on the porch, staring out at the land he had come to love. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light on the rolling hills. He felt a profound sense of defeat. He had tried, but he was no match for the machinations of the powerful men in the city. Ilara sat beside him, a silent, comforting presence. "We won't let them win," she said, her voice a fierce whisper. "What can we do?" he asked, his voice filled with despair. "We have no money. We have no leverage. We're fighting a rigged game." "We have something they don't," she said, her eyes fixed on him. "We have the support of the community. We have the respect of the people. And we have the truth." The next day, Silas rode into town, a plan forming in his mind. He went to the general store and spoke to its owner, an old man named Mr. Abernathy. He told him everything about the debt, about Stone and Finch, about the rigged auction. Abernathy listened, his face growing grimmer with every word. He then went to the saloon and told the barkeeper, who in turn told the blacksmith, and the news spread like wildfire. The town, a small community of hard-working people, was outraged. The Crawford family was part of their history, and the idea of a vulture like Stone swooping in to steal their legacy was an insult to them all. On the day of the auction, the town square was packed. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Stone and Finch were there, their faces a mask of smug arrogance. They saw the crowd, but they dismissed it, believing that a few angry people couldn't stop the power of a bank and a well-crafted plan. The auctioneer, a nervous man with a gavel in his hand, began the proceedings. He announced the details of the foreclosure and called for the first bid. Stone raised his hand, a confident smile on his face. $1,000. A hush fell over the crowd. The bid was a laughable insult, a blatant attempt to steal the land. The auctioneer looked around, but no one else spoke. The crowd was silent, their faces a mixture of anger and sadness. Silas's heart sank. He had hoped for a miracle, but it seemed their support was only moral, not financial. Then a voice rang out from the back of the crowd. It was Ilara. "Wait!" she yelled, pushing her way to the front, her son Ben holding her hand. Finch and Stone looked at her with contempt. "Mrs. Vance, this is no place for you," Finch said. Ilara ignored him. She looked at the auctioneer. "I have a bid. A real one." She held up a small leather pouch, its contents clinking softly. "I'm bidding this." A ripple of confusion and then murmuring spread through the crowd. Franklin Stone laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "A pouch of coins? Is this a joke, Mrs. Vance? This is a serious matter." Ilara's eyes were fixed on the auctioneer. "This is not a joke. This is all the money I have in the world. It's the savings my husband and I had set aside for our son's future. It's not a lot, but it's more than nothing." The auctioneer hesitated, looking from Ilara to Finch, who was shaking his head in anger. "That's not how an auction works, Mrs. Vance." "This isn't just an auction," Ilara said, her voice clear and strong. "This is a statement. This is the price of a legacy. This land is worth more than money. It's worth a lifetime of hard work, of dreams, of family." Just then, Mr. Abernathy, the general store owner, stepped forward. "She's right," he said. This is an outrage. We've all seen what's been happening. The work Silas and Ilara have put in. This land isn't just dirt and rock. It's their home. It's our community. One by one, other people stepped forward. The blacksmith, the saloon keeper, the ranchers whose herds Silas had helped save. They all held out small amounts of money, a handful of coins, a few wrinkled bills. "This is from me," the blacksmith said, placing a small pouch of coins on the table. "For the fences Silas helped me fix. This is for the hay you gave my family after the flood," another rancher said, placing a few dollars on the pile. "This is for keeping the place from falling to pieces," Jed said, stepping forward and adding his life savings to the growing pile. The pile of money grew. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a testament to the power of a community united. It was a tangible representation of their support, a silent protest against the greed of Stone and Finch. Franklin Stone's confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a scowl of disbelief. Finch, the lawyer, looked utterly flustered. They had planned for a quick, bloodless acquisition, not a public uprising. "This is ridiculous," Finch spluttered. "This is not a legitimate bid. You can't bid with handfuls of change." "It's more legitimate than your rigged game," Silas said, stepping forward. He looked at the growing pile of money, at Ilara's fierce determination, at the unwavering support of the community. He felt a profound sense of pride. He had come here with nothing but a name, and in 6 months he had earned a community. The auctioneer, a decent man at heart, looked at the crowd, then at the pile of money, and then at the defeated look on Stone and Finch's faces. He saw the truth in the people's eyes. He raised his gavel, a single bead of sweat rolling down his temple. "The last bid," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "is from the people. Do I have any more bids?" Silence. The square was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Stone was a statue of impotent rage. He couldn't bid against the entire town, not without a public relations nightmare and a potential legal challenge that would drag on for years. The auctioneer took a deep breath. "Sold," he said, and the gavel fell with a final echoing thud. A cheer erupted from the crowd. People were laughing, crying, and embracing. Silas stood in the center of it all, a sense of wonder washing over him. He had won, not with money, but with something far more valuable. He walked to Ilara, who was watching him, a small, triumphant smile on her face. He took her hand, his calloused palm fitting perfectly against hers. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us." "We did it," she corrected him. "Together." The feeling of their hands clasped together was more powerful than any legal document, more binding than any bank contract. The Crawford Ranch was theirs, not just his, but theirs. And in that moment he knew, with a certainty that reached into his very soul, that this was how it's done. This was the way a man earns his legacy. The aftermath of the auction was a whirlwind of relief and celebration. The townspeople, who had contributed to the collective bid, refused to take their money back. They said it was a loan, a gesture of goodwill, and that the ranch would pay them back when it was prosperous again. Silas promised he would. He knew it was more than just money. It was a pact, a promise to be a part of their community, to be a good neighbor. Franklin Stone and Mr. Finch left town in a cloud of humiliation and defeat. They had underestimated the power of the human spirit and the strength of a united community. Their greed had been no match for the simple, honest will of the people. With the ranch's future secured, Silas's and Ilara's work took on a new sense of purpose. It was no longer a desperate race against the clock. It was the careful, deliberate work of building a life, of honoring a legacy. They worked side by side every day. They hired more hands, young men from the town who were eager for honest work. They bought a small herd of healthy cattle, a down payment on their promise to the town. The ranch was coming alive, the empty corrals filling with the lowing of cattle, the silent fields stirring with the promise of new life. One evening, Silas found Ilara and her son Ben sitting on the porch of the main house. She was telling him a story, and the boy was listening intently, his eyes wide with wonder. Silas stood for a moment, watching them. It was a beautiful, simple picture of a family. "You should move in here," he said, his voice quiet. Ilara looked up, surprised. "Silas, this isn't a business arrangement anymore, Ilara," he said, walking toward them. "It's a partnership. This is your home as much as it is mine. You're the one who saved it. This house, it needs life in it. It needs a family." Ilara's eyes filled with tears. "My husband," she began. "James's memory will always be here," Silas said, looking at the small cabin where she had lived. "This move doesn't diminish his legacy. It honors it. He loved this land. He loved you. I think he'd want you to be happy. And I want that, too." He knelt down and looked at Ben. "What do you say, Ben? Do you want to live in the big house?" The boy's face broke into a wide smile. "Yes," he said, his voice full of excitement. Ilara's smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Yes." The next day they began moving her and Ben's belongings into the main house. It was a simple transition, but it felt monumental. The house, once a dusty mausoleum of a man's life, was now a home. The scent of pine and old leather was replaced by the scent of fresh-baked bread and the quiet laughter of a child. Silas found a quiet sense of peace he had never known. The pressure of deadlines and debt had been replaced by the quiet, daily rhythms of ranch life. He was no longer a man running from his past or trying to buy his future. He was a man building a present, a life with purpose and meaning. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, he and Ilara sat on the porch, watching Ben chase fireflies in the yard. The land was theirs, the future was bright, and the ghosts of the past had finally been laid to rest. Silas looked at the woman beside him, her face bathed in the soft, golden light. He had come here for an inheritance of dust and debt. Instead, he had found something immeasurably more valuable. He had found a family, and he knew in his heart that this was how it's done. The next year was a testament to the old adage that hard work pays. The once barren fields were now lush with new grass, and the herd of cattle, a mix of their original stock and the new additions, was growing healthy and strong. Silas had immersed himself in the day-to-day life of the ranch, his skills now as sharp as any seasoned rancher's. He could ride a horse like he'd been born on one, mend a fence with practiced ease, and read the weather in the clouds as if they were a book. The main house, now a true home, buzzed with life. Ilara's presence had filled the dusty rooms with warmth and purpose. Ben, her son, no longer a shy, quiet boy, was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity. He followed Silas and Jed around, asking 1,000 questions, his bright eyes absorbing every detail of ranch life. Silas found himself taking on the role of a father figure, teaching Ben how to tie a proper knot and identify the different birds that nested in the eaves of the barn. Ilara and Silas's relationship had evolved into something deeper and more profound than a simple partnership. Their shared experiences, the battles they had fought and won together, had forged a bond of mutual respect and quiet affection. The ranch was no longer just a place of business. It was the foundation of their life together. One afternoon, as they were working on the new fence line, a rider approached. It was a local banker, a different man from the one who had tried to foreclose on them. He was a quiet, unassuming man who had watched their progress from a distance. "Mr. Crawford," the banker began, removing his hat, "I've been hearing a lot about the work you've done here. The community is speaking very highly of you. And the ranch, it looks prosperous." Silas nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "We've been working hard. Hard work that has not gone unnoticed," the banker said. We've reviewed your case. We've seen the collective loan from the town, the growth of your herd, and the good standing you've established with the community. We've decided to offer you a new loan. A fair one." It would allow you to pay off the town's collective debt and give you the capital to expand even further. The offer was a lifeline, a sign that the world of finance, once so cold and impersonal, was now recognizing their success. But Silas hesitated. He looked at Ilara, who was watching him with a serene expression. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Silas said, "but we'll have to discuss it. We'll get back to you." The banker nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Silas and Ilara in the quiet of the afternoon. "Are you not going to take it?" Ilara asked, her voice soft. "It's a fair deal. It would help us so much." "It would," Silas admitted, "but it would also put us back in a relationship with a bank. We've come this far without one. The money from the town, it's a promise, a trust. I don't want to break that trust by rushing into another debt. We can pay them back. It's just going to take a little more time." Ilara's smile was a slow, warm thing that reached her eyes. "That's the right thing to do," she said. "The Crawford I met 6 months ago would have signed those papers on the spot." "The Crawford you met 6 months ago was a fool," he said, and for the first time he was able to say it without bitterness, only with the wisdom of hindsight. He had come to the West to claim an inheritance of land and money, but he had found something far more valuable, a moral compass, a sense of right and wrong that was not dictated by ledgers and contracts. Later that day they rode to the small homestead where Jed lived. Silas had promised to give Jed a day off, a rare luxury for the old foreman. They found Jed sitting on his porch, a look of quiet satisfaction on his face as he watched the sunset. "Jed," Silas began, "about the money from the town. We're going to pay them back. It might take us a little longer, but we're going to do it. We're not going to get a new loan just to pay off the old one." Jed looked at him, his tired eyes filled with a deep, paternal pride. "That's a good boy, Silas. That's what your father would have done." The words, so simple and sincere, hit Silas with the force of a revelation. He had spent his entire life trying to live up to the image of his father, only to find that the truest way to honor him was to be his own man. He had learned to be a man of the land, a man of his word, not in the city, but here, in the heart of the dusty, unforgiving West. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch, Silas felt a profound sense of peace. The harvest they had been working toward was not just of cattle and grass. It was a harvest of character, of community, of a life well lived. And the most beautiful part was that they had done it together, building a legacy that was not about money, but about something infinitely more enduring. The news of Silas's decision to pay back the town's loan rather than take a new one spread quickly. It was a quiet act, but its impact was felt throughout the community. It solidified his reputation not just as a successful rancher, but as a man of honor. The people who had put their trust in him were now more than just creditors. They were partners in his success. The ranch continued to prosper. The herd grew, and they were able to hire more men, bringing in much-needed employment to the area. Silas and Ilara worked tirelessly, their partnership seamless and unspoken. They shared a look and knew what the other was thinking. They planned, they dreamed, and they built. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the ranch. It was from Franklin Stone. Silas opened it with a sense of foreboding. Stone was offering to buy a small part of the ranch, a prime piece of grazing land that bordered his property. He claimed it was a fair offer, but Silas knew the man's true nature. It was a test, a last attempt to get a foothold on the Crawford ranch. Silas showed the letter to Ilara. She read it, her face a mask of quiet contemplation. "He's trying to get a foot in the door," she said. "Once he has a piece of the land, he'll try to take more. He'll poison the well, start trouble with the cattle. He won't rest until he has it all." "I know," Silas said, crumpling the letter in his hand. "He's a vulture. He won't quit until he has the whole carcass." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her gaze steady. "I'm going to tell him no," Silas said, his voice firm, "and I'm going to do it in person." He rode to Stone's sprawling, soulless ranch the next day. It was a stark contrast to the Crawford ranch. It was all straight lines and cold metal, a place built for profit, not for life. Stone met him in his office, a room filled with polished wood and the sterile scent of ink. "Crawford," Stone said, a thin smile on his face. "I'm surprised you came. You should be grateful for this offer. It's a lifeline. I can see the potential of this land better than you can." "I don't doubt you can see the potential for a profit," Silas said, his voice level. "But that's all you see. I see the land. I see the history. I see the community. My father trusted me to protect his legacy. I won't let you or anyone else steal it away from the people who helped me save it." Stone's smile vanished. "You're a fool, Crawford. A sentimental fool. You think sentiment can stand up to money and power." "I think sentiment is power," Silas said. "The power of a community, the power of a promise. You have all the money in the world, Stone, but you have no one who trusts you, no one who respects you. We have that, and it's more valuable than anything you could ever buy." Silas stood up, his posture radiating a quiet, unshakable confidence. "My answer is no. This ranch is not for sale. Not a single blade of grass. You can write all the letters you want. You can send all the lawyers you want. We are not selling." Stone's face twisted in a silent rage. He had come to the West to dominate, to buy up land and build an empire. But he had been thwarted by a man who had chosen to build something far more enduring than an empire, a life of integrity. Silas rode away, the dust from his horse a small cloud in the distance. He had done it. He had faced down his nemesis and won, not with a fist fight, but with a simple, quiet truth. He had become the man his father had always wanted him to be. Not a cold businessman, but a good man. When he returned to the ranch, Elara was waiting for him on the porch. He dismounted, and she looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "He's not a problem anymore," Silas said, the words a simple declaration of victory. She smiled, and it was a smile that lit up the entire yard. It was a smile of relief, of pride, of a deep and abiding love. The weight of the past, the burden of his father's legacy, had finally been lifted. He had found his place, his purpose, and his future, all in the heart of a Texas ranch and in the eyes of a woman who had taught him what it truly meant to be a man. With the threat of Franklin Stone finally extinguished, the Crawford Ranch entered a new, golden era. The ranch prospered, and so did the community around it. Silas, now a respected figure, became a leader in the town, a man people looked up to for his wisdom and integrity. He and Elara continued to work side by side, their days a testament to their shared love for the land and for each other. One evening, Silas found Elara and Ben in the barn. Ben was trying to saddle a horse, his small hands fumbling with the leather straps. Elara was watching him, a look of quiet pride on her face. "Here, let me show you," Silas said, kneeling beside the boy. He took Ben's hands and guided them, showing him the proper way to handle the bridle, the right way to throw the saddle blanket over the horse's back. He wasn't just teaching him a task. He was teaching him a way of life, the same way his father had taught Jed, and Jed had taught Elara. It was a chain of knowledge, a legacy passed down through generations. Ben listened intently, his eyes fixed on Silas's face. When they were done, he looked up, his face serious. "Is this how Grandpa Arthur would have done it?" he asked. Silas smiled. "He would have done it exactly like this," he said, and the words were true. His father had not taught him these things, but in a way he had taught him through Elara, through Jed, and through the land itself. That night, after Ben was asleep, Silas and Elara sat on the porch, the silence between them a comfortable, familiar thing. "He looks up to you," Elara said, her voice soft. "He thinks you're the greatest man in the world." "I'm just a man who learned what's important," Silas said, taking her hand. "You taught me that." "I just showed you the way," she said. "You're the one who walked the path." Silas turned to her, his heart full. "Ilara," he began, I can't imagine my life without you. You're my partner, my family. I want to make this official. I want to marry you, to be Ben's father, to be a family, a real one. Duh." Ilara's eyes filled with tears, her smile a mixture of joy and surprise. "Silas," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." They were married a month later in a small ceremony in the town church. The entire town came out to celebrate, a testament to the love and respect they had for the couple. Silas, a man who had once felt like an outsider in his own land, was now a cornerstone of the community. He was no longer just the heir to a ranch. He was the patriarch of a family, a man of the West in every sense of the word. The years that followed were a quiet, happy blur of hard work, family, and the slow, beautiful rhythm of life on the ranch. Ben grew into a strong, kind-hearted young man, a perfect blend of his mother's resilience and Silas's hard-won wisdom. He learned every aspect of the ranch, riding with Jed and working side by side with Silas, a new generation ready to carry on the legacy. Silas often found himself looking at the ranch, a sense of wonder and gratitude in his heart. The fields, the corrals, the house, they were all a testament to a journey, to a man who had come home and found not just a place, but a purpose. He had been a man without a future, a man with a past that haunted him. Now, he was a man with a future he had built with his own 2 hands, with a family he had chosen, and with a legacy that was not about inheritance, but about love. Years passed. The Crawford Ranch was now an undisputed success, a model of resilience and hard work. Silas, now a middle-aged man with streaks of gray in his hair, was a respected leader in the community. He and Ilara were a rock of strength, their love for each other as deep and enduring as the land they had saved. One day, as Silas and Ben, now a young man, were working the fences, a familiar figure appeared on the horizon. It was Jed, now a retired old man, but still sharp as a tack. "Silas," Jed said, his voice a low rumble, "we have a visitor." Silas turned, and a man was standing in the yard of the main house. He was dressed in a fine, tailored suit, and he looked familiar. The man turned, and Silas's heart skipped a beat. It was his brother, Thomas, the brother who had stayed in Boston, the brother who had never come back, the one who had always looked down on the family legacy. Thomas was a cold, calculating man, and he looked at the thriving ranch with a mix of surprise and thinly veiled jealousy. "Silas," Thomas said, his voice a polished drone, "I must say I'm impressed. The place looks successful." "It is," Silas said, his voice guarded. "What are you doing here, Thomas?" "Our mother's old lawyer passed away," Thomas said. "I found some documents in his office. It appears there was a misunderstanding with the will. There was a section, a provision that gave me the right of first refusal to buy the ranch. I've always thought it was a shame that you inherited this place and ran it into the ground." Silas felt a cold knot of anger tighten in his gut. "I didn't run it into the ground, Thomas. I saved it." "With what?" "A widow and a handful of coin." Thomas scoffed, looking at Ilara, who had just come out of the house. "I'm offering you a chance to rectify this mistake. I'll buy the ranch from you. For a very generous price, of course. You can take the money and get out of this dusty hell." Silas's hands clenched into fists. He had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and now his own brother, a man who had never lifted a finger to help, was trying to take it all away. "It's not for sale, Thomas," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't be a fool, Silas," Thomas said, his voice rising in frustration. "This is a golden opportunity for you. You can have a life of comfort, a life you were meant to have. You can leave this place and come back to civilization." "This is my civilization," Silas said, gesturing around at the ranch, at the fields, at the home he had built. "This is my home. This is my family, my son, my wife. I wouldn't trade this for all the money in the world." Thomas stared at him, a look of complete incomprehension on his face. He saw only numbers, only assets, only a business transaction. He couldn't understand the emotional weight of a place, the legacy of a family, the love of a wife and son. "I will not sell, Thomas," Silas said, his voice a quiet final thing, "and I will not listen to another word from you. Get off my land." Thomas's face was a mask of defeat. He had come here expecting an easy victory, a chance to take what he believed was rightfully his, but he had been met with a man he no longer knew, a man who was stronger, wiser, and more powerful than any banker in Boston. Thomas turned on his heel and walked back to his horse, a defeated, solitary figure. He mounted and rode away, a single bitter cloud of dust in his wake. Silas watched him go, a profound sense of closure washing over him. The spectre of his past, the shadow of his old life, had finally been vanquished. He had chosen the right path. He had chosen the hard path, and it had led him to a life he would have never found anywhere else, a life of purpose, of love, and of a legacy he had built with his own 2 hands. The years rolled on, each one a testament to the enduring strength of the Crawford Ranch and the family that had saved it. Ben, now a man, was a perfect blend of his mother's gentle wisdom and Silas's quiet strength. He had learned everything Silas and Ilara had taught him, and he had made it his own. He was the future of the ranch. One spring morning, Silas found Ben sitting on the porch, mending a bridle, the same way Ilara had been doing the day Silas had first met her. Ben looked up, a small smile on his face. "Dad," he said, using the word that had become so natural to him. "Jed said we need to repair the fence on the south pasture. The old one is falling apart." Silas looked at him, and he saw not just his son, but a man who was ready. He was ready to take on the mantle of responsibility, ready to carry on the legacy. "You should go with him," Silas said. "You're the foreman now." Ben's eyes widened in surprise. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Jed is retiring," Silas said, a soft smile on his face. "He's earned it. He's been the heart of this ranch for longer than I can remember. It's time for him to rest, and it's time for you to take his place." Ben's face was a mix of shock and honor. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Silas said, his voice firm and filled with pride. "You've earned it, son. You've been working on this ranch your whole life. You know the land better than anyone. It's your turn." Ben stood up, his posture radiating a quiet, newfound confidence. He was no longer just a boy learning the ropes. He was the next generation of the Crawford Ranch. Silas watched him go, a profound sense of satisfaction in his heart. He had not just saved a ranch, he had built a legacy. He had raised a son who would carry on the work, who would protect the land, and who would honor the promise that had been made all those years ago. Later that day, Silas and Ilara walked the fields, their hands clasped together. Their steps were slower now, their bodies more weathered by the years, but their love for each other was as strong as ever. "Look at him," Ilara said, her voice filled with a mother's pride. "He's a good man, Silas, a kind man. You taught him that." "We both did," Silas said. "We taught him that a life of meaning is not about what you have, but about who you are. We taught him that a legacy is not a thing you inherit, it's a thing you build." The sun began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows across the land. The ranch was a picture of quiet prosperity. The cattle were grazing peacefully, the house was warm and inviting, and the future was secure. Silas looked at Ilara, the love in his eyes a deep and enduring thing. He had come here with nothing but a name and a grudging duty. He had found a family, a purpose, and a life he had never dared to dream of. He had learned that the truest riches were not found in a bank or in a will. They were found in a home, in a family, and in a heart that had finally learned what it meant to love. Years later, Silas and Ilara sat on the porch of the main house. They were old now, their hair white, their faces lined with the wisdom of a life well lived. The ranch was thriving, a testament to the generations of hard work and love that had been poured into its soil. Ben, now a man in his own right, ran the ranch with quiet authority, his wife and children now filling the house with laughter and life. It was a quiet evening, the kind of evening that was perfect for reflection. "Do you remember," Ilara said, her voice a soft, nostalgic murmur, "the day you came here? You were so full of anger and frustration. You hated this place." Silas smiled, his eyes twinkling with a shared memory. "I was a fool," he said. "I thought this place was a burden, a mistake. I came here to sell it and go back to a life of comfort. I was so blind." "You weren't blind," she said, taking his hand. "You just hadn't seen yet. You hadn't seen the truth of this place. The truth that the greatest inheritance isn't a piece of land or a bank account. It's a way of life, a legacy of love, of hard work, of family." Silas looked out at the land, at the setting sun, at the home they had built together. He saw Ben and his son, a young boy with his mother's dark hair, riding a horse toward the corrals. The sight filled him with a profound sense of peace. He had come here as a stranger, a man without a purpose, and he had become a part of something larger, something more meaningful than any wealth he could have ever amassed. He had learned that the greatest legacy a man could leave behind was not a name on a building or a number in a bank. It was a life of integrity, of love, of a quiet, unshakable strength. It was the ability to look back on his life and know that he had done the right thing, that he had fought for what was good and true, and that he had built a life that was worth living. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden light on the ranch, Silas looked at Ilara, the love in his heart, a deep and enduring thing. He had found his destiny not in the city, not in a bank, but in the dusty plains of the American West. He had found it in the eyes of a woman, in the heart of a son, and in the quiet, simple dignity of a life well lived. This was how it was done. This was the way a man earns his legacy, by a simple act of faith, a leap of trust, and a life of courage. And in the end, it was the greatest inheritance of all.